Hello, and welcome to the Be Formless Flow Driven CEO podcast, where we are reshaping life, leadership, and business from the inside out. It's Fabulous Friday here today in Melbourne, Australia, and it is a fabulous, I'm saying a fabulous Thursday afternoon in San Francisco, where it's mid-afternoon, around PM to be precise. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, thank you. Thank you. And I got to say, when we were just chatting quickly before the show, before hitting record and joining all the listeners, and hello to everybody who is listening right now, by the way, I feel a bit seasick.
Well, the help if I could do this, does it make it worse or
No,
better?
please don't move around, because it's like, it's not a real horizon. So I actually get seasick. And so my dad always says to me when we used to be out on our boat, he used to always say to me, just look out to the horizon, look out to the horizon. So you've got a beautiful backdrop.
Thank you.
And it's not a real horizon.
No, it's not. I very fortunately and appropriately don't get seasick. Everyone else around me seems to, but I do then you get off a boat after you've been sailing for a while and you still feel it for a
Wobbly
week.
legs.
Yeah, it's great. I actually like it, but whatever.
Yeah. And we're going to come back to this because you had an epiphany when you were out in sea solo. So you're the co-founder and executive director. You're also a brand strategist and a storytelling architect for Here Be Dragons, which is a creative agency focused on helping brands move beyond transactions into something deeper. You turn buyers into believers through story, meaning, and connection. And I think the story, meaning, and connection is more important than ever. And for anyone listening here who has their own business or, is working with brand, this is going to be a great conversation for you. So you've got 25 years of experience across brand performance and integrated marketing. And Eric, you've worked across startups, growth stage, and established companies where you build campaigns, teams, and brand platforms that connect at a human level, not just a commercial one. And your work today is shaped by something more powerful. And I mentioned this, you were on a solo journey. I don't even know the story, everybody, across the Pacific Ocean. And it became a turning point, shifting how you see leadership, relationships, and the role of presence in both life and business. That experience reshaped your approach to brand building, away from the pure execution and toward authentic connection, self-awareness, and the deeper dynamic that actually moves people. Through Here Be Dragons, Eric and his team work with companies to align what they say with who they are, creating brand systems that are not only strategic but felt. So given the backdrop, let's pretend we're out in the middle of the ocean with you, and we're just little birds flying around you or fishies jumping out of the water, and we're watching you have this epiphany.
All right. Full disclosure, I was a part of a 2-person crew.
Okay, 2-person crew.
And we were doing what's called I believe a Swiss schedule, where during the daylight hours, you're on for 3 hours, and at night you're on for 4, which means you are never getting more than 4 hours of sleep at a time. So by the time you're 16 days into a trip, you're getting a little loopy. The moment I had was I was actually looking at our nav chart and looking at playing with zooming in and out, and you realizing as you were zooming in, here's where we are in the ocean, and here's how we're moving, and our relationship to what's around us most immediately. And I would play around with zooming out and have this perspective wow, what a tiny dot in the middle of nowhere on this big, beautiful planet that's in this big cosmos. When looked at that scale, you realize the insignificance of your own personal self, right? And then you zoom in and you look over the person next to you and you realize how massively significant you are to that individual, and how important that is relationship between the two of you. Because frankly, without the other person in this particular moment, you aren't going to survive. And so then I came back from that trip, it was supposed to be 12 days. It ended up being 18. It was fraught with lots of mishaps and misadventures, and we had lost the ability to make water for a while, which, as you can imagine, is an issue in the middle of the ocean and we fixed these things. But it just doubled down on the importance of the relationships we have with one another and how much we actually do rely on our relationships and the people around us and the people we surround ourselves with to achieve in our lives, but just frankly get along in this beautiful planet. So bringing that back, I reflected upon all that, not only in like how I build teams and how I work with other people, but then in thinking about how brands relate to the human beings they try and serve, because that's what we do in the end. Like a brand should serve its people, not just sell them stuff. So that just shaped ultimately how I thought about doing our work, and how I was going to approach my life's mission moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. Was there any moments out in sea where, like, lack of sleep, like, was it intentional that you were out there for 18 days versus 12? Or was that, like, kind of part of being, like, when you talked about running out of water? Like, were there any, like, NDE experiences, near-death experiences, or was it more just,
Not not as immediately for me. There were some moments when, like, let's say that I would have preferred not to have found myself in, like, hanging off the bow of the boat, trying to fix the foremost sail would not be something that, like, oh, wow, this is cool. I could fall off and never be seen again. My sailing partner did get crushed between an object that slammed against the side of the boat and his head. So that was like he was out of commission for a little bit of while, making sure he didn't have a major concussion. But so there were those kinds of moments when you reflect on things. I think it wasn't near death as much as like you realize the impact we're having on the planet. As we're coming back from Hawaii, you just naturally end up going through the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And at the time, I didn't fully appreciate where we were in relation to the ocean. But we didn't see a living thing for 4 days. We did see, well, I shouldn't, that's not entirely accurate. I did see a Prestone bottle floating, can or jug floating in the ocean with a barnacle attached to it. And you just, like, it dawns on you the impact we're having on this planet
yeah,
and on the living things around us. We pushed through that and got closer to the California coast, and suddenly pods of dolphins are swimming off our bow, like welcoming us back. So there's some reflection you have about the impact we make on the world and how insignificant we are individually, but how over time that adds up into something pretty major, even for things that aren't other human beings.
yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool. And have you always been into sailing? Like, or was that just an epic 2-week adventure that you decided to take?
When I moved out to San Francisco, I actually got very involved in sailing. It's funny, I was pitching at the Monterey Bay Aquarium and had to do some thinking about how much time I'd actually spent out in the open ocean. And in the end, when I consider all my trips up and down the California coast and my sailing out to Hawaii and back from Hawaii and all that, I'm like, oh, I've probably logged about 4,000 miles in the open ocean, nautical miles. That's a lot of time you realize you've spent somewhere.
It's very cool. And it's like, I think I mentioned presence, you have this ability to be present. And when you've got nothing else around you, nothing else surrounding you, and, like, what are you thinking about? Like, and for me, this is where your most creative ideas come. Like when you're in the present moment, when you're able just to have some non-time, if you like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's funny too because out there you find those moments, and there's also like a certain like it's it's interesting how when the environment you put yourself in, like, actions itself inside yourself, you know what I mean? Like there's such clarity you come to because you at night, for example, you look up and there is such clarity in the world around you. You see everything
Yeah, I love
in
that.
that sky. And so you can't help but have a little bit more clarity about your own personal life and personal things and what you want to get out of it and where you want to go and how important things are. So I think that actually ends up like, again, I didn't come to this moment of thought with that nav chart story until like halfway, three-quarters way through the trip. But it's, I think, in part because I've been so immersed in this space of like, there is nothing. And in that nothingness, there is such clarity.
That's totally right. In that nothingness, that is a great quote. In that nothingness, there is such clarity. And we were just talking pre-show around being tired. It's Friday. And you said, is it tired from, I recently had some surgery, or is it tired from just life? And, coming right back to this nothingness and the clarity that comes, it's kind of what I feel like I need right now. I need some nothingness, just some time, just for some nothingness and people think nothingness is like, I can't do nothing. Like that's being lazy and it's boring. It's this, it's that. And yet it is where the clarity comes from and it is where the creativity comes. Excuse me. It is where you can solve things you haven't been able to solve for a long time because you get all these downloads just come flying in. You're like, huh,
Yeah.
and you're not even thinking about it. You're not even efforting. It's like sailing on water. You're just sailing.
Yeah. It's kind of moving along. Yeah. Like life does have a tendency, speaking of the sailing thing, of moving itself along, even if you're not doing anything. If you're
Mm.
if you are just taking a moment, sometimes the action of just being present and letting things flow, flow science and whatnot. I did read a little bit about that, knowing that
Yeah,
that's
100%.
that's what you're into. Letting things carry you and surround you sometimes can be the best way to observe like what's passing by so that you can then figure out what you want your role and spot and position to be within that, how you want to impact it. I find in reading, sometimes I get that too, especially if I can really get into something and separate myself from where I'm at and put myself into where that story is taking me. I can find that sometimes inspirational as well. But yeah, there's nothing compares to being forcibly removed from the world around you, which is exactly what we were out there.
Yeah, amazing. All right, let's switch it up.
Okay.
Here Be Dragons. Tell us a bit about Here Be Dragons. I did 25 plus years in advertising and communications, and I was asking you, how's it going right now? There's a lot of change happening. So, firstly, I want to know how did Here Be Dragons, the name, come about? And then I want what you're seeing in the landscape, what's happening, in the creative world. We were talking just before around the concern or the watch out, I should say, of too much beige and brands, not actually connecting with human beings like you talked about before. Instead, we could have just these beige brands and humans just they don't really choose anymore. It's just, here's beige for you.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting area of conversation to have. First, I'll take the first part of that first, because first cut should come first. You would ask Here Be Dragons where it came from. It's long been a story that about when they were making maps. There were blank spots on maps, and the cartographers and the drawers of those maps back in the age of exploration didn't quite know what to put there. So they put dragons in these undiscovered spaces. They put sea monsters, all these kinds of things to warn you that there be danger. And so there be these dragons. We chose that name because we want to help our clients go and explore those undiscovered spaces and give them a little bit of the courage they need to go there. And every brands have their different like liminality for like how much they're willing to push it. We just want to help people push a bit. And in that discomfort, we think that they can find better ways to connect with people and more interesting ways to get work done. So that's where that comes from. It does lead into the whole beige discussion. In that, like, and I had been reading about this the other day too, not in the sense of like AI is going to do certain things, but somebody was making the argument about digital tools and how we've become so performance oriented and data driven. And not that those things aren't important, but we all have the same suite of tools at our disposal. We all have the same benchmarks that we're trying to beat. We all have these similar things that are structuring, and our clients have these similar things that are structuring their campaigns and how they execute them. So over time, that just it has a tendency to pull everything into the exact same spot because there's nothing differentiating about how we're measuring or directing campaigns based on those tools, right? What it does become differentiating is the actual work that goes into those spaces. But if you let data drive too much of that, you basically drive the risk taking out of the work. And it's, I think, in that risk taking where we actually make the kind of real connections with other people versus like think about any relationship you've ever had, right? Like if everything's always expected that you're going to happen over time, you grow bored of that relationship
Yeah,
and you move
totally.
on. You need people to inspire you with a little bit of like, I didn't expect that from you. And that's a
Yeah.
very exciting and interesting thing. Let's go do that together. Let's go explore that together. And I think brands do develop personalities and engage with us in a very similar way. Like that's where a brand comes from. It's a spot in someone's brain. It's what they think about the thing, the product or service when they're not engaging with it.
Mm.
Right. And I we need to be bringing more of that. So it brings me to
Do you think more than ever? Like, do you think we're at like this, I guess, point in time where if we're not careful, we're going to lose sight of undiscovered spaces? Let's use your language. Like, are you concerned for the industry at large? Like the industry you're in? I'm going deep.
yeah, what that gets really interesting for me from the perspective of my answer has to be maybe. It depends. Like, where are we going to push things? What are we going? Are like we going to go quietly into the night, or are we going to stand here and fight and like try and push to keep things interesting and force clients to think that way about stuff? I think AI might unlock a new creative renaissance in the sense of like it's this new technology where we're going to have AI as individual consumers finding the stuff we're going to buy and doing the research, and AI then writes the websites and puts out the information for the brand for the companies, right? And so the robots just talk to the robots and come up with a list of things or buying decisions for a human being to potentially execute against, right? Well, then what steps into that for me to choose between the three options you've given me, but brand preference? And how am I going to develop that? If the AI bot is going to not give me brand emotional preference things. It's going to talk to me about things that were written that allow you to do a pro con list or whatever based on a table to make the assessment, right? It's going to be, and I think the renaissance happens not really in the digital space, but it actually in the physical world that AI can't exist in or does not exist in quite yet. Billboards and TV and things like
Yeah.
that may actually come back.
Podcast.
Yeah, as a tool to get us to go like, that brand is cool. I have preference for that brand. So when it pops on the list that AI has given me to purchase from, that's the one I'm going to pick.
Yeah, it's a good. I actually think there's a creative renaissance as well, and I think there's also a identity renaissance happening in terms of you have to have an identity. You have to have a brand identity. You have to have a business identity. You have to have a team identity. You have to have a personal founder, whatever identity. And if you don't, you will stand out. You won't stand out. You'll be beige.
Yeah.
What about clients? Like, you obviously have a number of clients, and there's also, from a marketing perspective, etc. Like, what are you seeing from your clients at the moment? What is keeping them awake at night? What's keeping them awake at night? And then how is that impacting you and your team, or how are you then looking at things differently for them?
I mean, with some part of it is like, how close is the client into like, how competitive is their industry and how much spending is going on and how involved are their competitors in their industry. In other cases, like how technical is the business? We have a B2B client where we're getting very, very involved in helping them figure out how to talk to LLMs and how to help these AI read their stuff to better surface them in these lists that AI is coming back to, facility managers and whatnot. So that's for them, it's very like technically and tactically real. In the insurance space, where, what is Geico spends like $1 billion a year in advertising, it still is very much a conversation. How do you get people's attention
Yeah.
and communicate and connect with an actual real human being about what somebody has to offer? So it really varies from client to client in terms of like how we're dealing with stuff. I think the overarching theme though is clients just like us are feeling the disruption of all the stuff going on, and having somebody to talk to and complain about stuff and just sometimes listen
Yeah,
without offering
100%.
an answer is helpful and instructive of like, now not only what's keeping them up at night, but like what is personally keeping them up at night, which helps us then, I think, better solve problems and understand where they're coming from in a perspective of something or mood that's going on in a day. I know it's weird. It's not like here's a campaign that needs to be executed immediately or some crazy strategic idea. Sometimes just being a human and being present though is the most important and valuable thing you can do for a client. and we
think
like to
it's the
instill that.
most important thing you can do. Like, to be honest, that's when you get your best work. That's when you get your best creativity. I've always had those sorts of relationships with my clients, especially when I was in advertising and communications. You're like their personal counselor. You're walking in their shoes. And, on days when they're having the shittest day known to mankind because they've got personal stuff going on, whatever, you're never going to get a campaign over the line. You're never going to get the work signed off, no matter how good the work is. And so it's being able to go in and read their inner psyche and understand them intrinsically. And I think back to what you were saying around understanding the human being, this self-awareness, the awareness of your client, etc. It's so important. And I think it's more important than ever because you raised a point before, which I wrote down around getting people's attention. And people's attention is hard to get at the moment because everyone is so overloaded. Like you and I came onto the show, my energy levels were a little bit like it is early Friday morning, I won't lie. And
Yeah, like we are at the opposite ends of that.
I know I could feel though your energy was like could have gone either way, depending on my energy, right? Because you've probably had a day or I don't know, I'm just kind of hypothesizing here. And
No,
it's like
you're right.
and so you've got to then quickly go, all right, well, if I'm coming to this with my energy not as high as it should be, and then you're coming to this. So you've got to be aware enough of yourself of how you're feeling, how that can then impact the other person. And I'm talking about from a client perspective here. And then how do you then shift it? How do you then enable them to subtract some of the cognitive load, have the space to be able to talk to you about, or for you to be able to talk to them about important stuff or things that, are relevant. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think it's a real art at the moment in terms of, and the ability to do that as a human to human.
Yeah. I think some of that comes like one, it's a needle of thread for us these days, I think, as an industry, because a lot of us are very project based, right? So you don't have your relationships with the client aren't always like 2 years ago, this thing happened that was a major sea change moment for somebody personally. And now you have that background 2 years later and saying, like, this is why this is the moment that this has all come to chickens have come to roost or whatever. And now I understand the perspective where, like, oftentimes we come in for 3 or 4 months or less and have to quickly ramp up and build a relationship and understand and be there and be positive and optimistic and all the right things, knowing that our term is going to be a very short period of time we're engaging things, but they still need to feel all that warmth and all that love and all that empathy that they would have with a partner that they might have for 2 years. That's just the way the operating model was moved. But
Do you
I
find
think
that challenging, Eric? Like, is that do you find that challenging?
no. And here's why. I think people successful in our business or any creative business these days are people that have to be hopelessly optimistic and optimistic and eternally like enthusiastic about ideas. Eternally enthusiastic and hopelessly optimistic. There we go. And I think that's part of like what people that have been very successful in this business have done and have always been. And because that it's easier for us to bring into the room an energy that helps get people excited about ideas. Because frankly, if you aren't those things, I don't think you make it very far in the business. Like who wants Debbie Downer
No,
or Donald Downer to walk into a room and be like, "Here's this new campaign I got for you that's going to change the
no,
fortunes of your business."
totally. Although, there's a lot of times when your ideas are just shot down.
Got to bounce back. Got it. Like you got to be that rubber ball that hits the wall and bounces right back with even more energy. And actually, sometimes what we've found is like, "Oh, you said no, but it's forced us to have to rejigger this thing. Oh, this is actually even better.
Yes, yes,
Thank you for saying no originally. We almost did something boring."
yeah. So
No.
do you think then that ego is, what's your view on ego? Like, because a lot of creativity has ego, or there's a lot of ego, and we've all got an ego, don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying, creatives are ego or anything like that. What would you say around ego though in the industry and what you do, because you have to lose it. You have to have the ability to like you say, let it bounce off you so you can bounce forward. And then generally you find a new idea. But when your ego gets in the way, your ego goes, fuck this. Like, they don't get it. You know, like, do you know what I mean? Like, the
Yeah.
amygdala starts kicking in. It's telling you, what would they know? They're useless. You're too good, or don't even try. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so what's your view on ego in this? Yeah.
You know, some of it comes from seasoning and because I remember being that way back young when I was a younger pup. So that season comes with seasoning. I also think like I'm I'm gonna say a bunch of things here, but I wanna make the point of like you can believe in an idea, but not be an asshole about it. Like you can
Yeah.
believe in an idea and push for an idea, but be empathetic and respectful and not let your ego get in the way of things that might actually help improve it around the edges or at its core. I think that's very possible to do. I'm very fortunate in that I have a creative partner who, again, has gotten seasoned and over time, like, I think has shed the artifice of ego while still being able to believe in ideas. And because we actually developed a process here that one of our clients actually called out and like, oh yeah, we should double down on that a little bit more in our conversations of how we pitch ourselves as an agency provider. But we get a brief and align to a brief with the client, and then we'll go away for a week or two and come back with 15, 20 half-baked ideas rather than like spend a month coming up with the campaign. And we come to the clients and we'll say, hey, because it typically goes like you have a client or two, right? And those clients or two have multiple organizations, multiple parts of the organization they have to then report to and sell their ideas into, right? So we'll come to these clients after that 2 weeks of like playing around with a brief and here's 15, 20 ideas. Why don't you invite some of those other people we're going to have to sell stuff to into the room and let's throw it up on the wall and talk about it and talk about what works and what doesn't, what you like and what you don't, what's inspiring you, where things could go. Involve them in the creative process so we can involve all that wonderful experience they have and all those perspectives in the actual development of the work. And it's not creative by committee because collaboration isn't a thing where like it's necessarily created by committee. It's like working together to work out a problem. But in the end, we're responsible for the end product. So we direct certain things and we're going to say respectfully, great feedback. We'll take that note, but we're going to do this with it. Or great feedback, but if we do that, we're going to have this problem. So you collaborate, but you also push back at the appropriate moments because you have knowledge that they don't have, and they have input that you don't have, and you've got to come together to put it together. So we do that earlier in the process without ego so that we get the better work in the end and get two ideas everyone in the organization's excited about. So we come back with two campaigns fleshed out that they actually have a hard time choosing between because they love them both. And we
Yeah.
just found that process to be a lot more seamless and useful and helpful for our clients in like making their work lives go better.
Yeah, I agree. And we used to call it tissue sessions. You'd
Yep.
have tissue sessions. Here's a hot one for you. And I'm going to ask you a couple of final questions to wrap up our time together. Before I do that though, I did an improv course a couple of years ago now, kind of coming out of the industry and, having some time out and it was really interesting actually. And I loved it because of the creative aspect of it and building on ideas and yes,
Yep.
and, I noticed and I do it and I got pulled up on it the other week, by this person and he's stuck with me now in terms of he said, "Stop using the word but." And he's like, "You keep using the word but and however." And I've even used it a couple of times today because I'm tired. I'm not using excuses, although I do think it's a little bit of that. And it's interesting when you stopped and said, like, we'll take it to this. And so in improv, it was around yes and so it's building. So it's a way of potentially shutting down something without just cutting it off in terms of, and if you notice when you use the word but, and it'll be interesting to see when you go away post the show, how much more you think about the word but now, because but is just a cut off. Like it just cuts things
Yeah.
off. versus yes and, like yes and on the idea. So when you're in that, next ideation session, if you like, with a client and they say something and you go, but you could say yes and and so it was just, so I love that from an improv. And then recently getting called out that but isn't language. Like it's a language, a word we should not use. And I'm like, oh. And so all the listeners listening to this, how often are you using but? And if you are using it, try using improvise and you use another word. And even if you get stuck on it, and I've been doing it, I've just been like, because even chat or even Claude, but, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's such a blocker. It's a blocker word.
Yeah, it immediately invalidates whatever came before it, right?
Totally.
Rather than making it a building block for something to
Yeah.
reach a new level. Yeah,
So
it's a good point.
we're invalidating each other's points in the conversation whenever we use the word but.
That's a good way to think about it. It's a good perspective to bring to it.
Yeah, so there you go. We've both just had a really cool conversation around that. You talked around, just quickly, I've got two final questions for you. You talked around life work, and I don't believe in the word balance. You just said, though, and I loved it. I loved what I heard because you brought it right back to humans with regards to your clients. And when you have these sessions, you get everyone in the room. It's iterative, it's building on yes and it's that improv, like it's like a jazz band, for example. And you can't, and so then you can go away and continue to work on, finessing the idea, etc. You brought up though that it also can, improve their life work. What do you mean by that when you say
Their lives at work?
yeah?
Well, because they've been able to include, one, let's be honest, oftentimes the most fun thing you get to do in a given day, if your agency is coming in, is look at creative work and look at ideas and talk about those things, right? Otherwise, 90% of the day is spreadsheets and moving paper around and trying to get, this PO signed or whatever, or some technical issue if you're a product developer. When our clients are able to bring all these people together, they don't get to do that stuff and engage in their work and engage with this agency that's going to come in and talk about crazy stuff. They get to have a moment that's inspirational for them and potentially, right? Or think about their work from a different perspective, which they can then take back to their jobs and go what if I did this? What is my yes and moment in this particular
Yeah.
frame, right? And that, in terms of our clients, makes their lives easier at work because, one, people have a little bit more empathy of what our client has to deal with in the situations that they have to work through and how a campaign gets made. But two, our clients then get to be these people that are showcasing empathy with their coworkers, which frankly makes it easier for them to get stuff done with those coworkers down the line, because there's been a moment, an opportunity for everyone to listen to one another and be respectful of each other's opinions.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
that's where I think it helps make their lives a little bit easier at work sometimes.
I love that. Great. Good response. I actually really love that response. Okay, final question. You're back out at sea. But
Yes.
this time maybe you're the bird, or maybe it's a leader out at sea. So you're a leader, you're an executive director, you're a co-founder. You're out at sea. There's nothing around you at all. And you have this opportunity. You're on a journey to undiscovered spaces. What would you be? What's my question here? I know what my question is. I'm just working out how to articulate it. So what I'm trying to say is, where would you be exploring right now in this, if you're out at sea and there's nothingness around you and there's just all these areas, right? And there's all these undiscovered spaces, and bringing it back to kind of the real world in terms of, back into, coming back to California, for example. If there's one area you could discover right now, where would you be guiding yourself to that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's from a agency business perspective,
Yes.
I'm fascinated right now by how building out a culture at work that can be the most rewarding possible thing it can for the people that work with us. That's where I want to, I think right now at this moment in time, point ourselves towards. Like ultimately, I think clients, whether you're doing a project or a long-term relationship with an agency, you're not really buying individuals. You're not buying past campaigns. Yeah, all that stuff gets somebody signed up, but you're really buying into a culture of the way work gets done and a culture that develops like solutions for your problems and creativity. But that culture comes from like people become part of that and stick around it and gravitate towards it because of how it rewards them and like how it makes them feel as individuals, people working with an agency. So I want to point my time and put some more effort towards like what are the actual hard things we need to do to help reward people and like help them improve and find their own paths and achieve their own goals in their careers and also live fuller, richer lives. Like we talk a lot here about the 4-day work week. I've got this crazy idea of like offering up folks that work with us an opportunity to take summers off to be with their kids and whatnot. And only so many people are going to be able to do that. But like, what kinds of things can we do to keep people fully charged and excited and enthusiastic about and optimistic, right? Eternally optimistic and enthusiastic about doing work. So that's where
Yeah.
I want to put my time.
I love that. I'm going to share with you. I'm going to share with you later today. You've read a little bit about flow science. There's individual
Yeah.
flow triggers, and then there's group flow triggers, and it's really impactful when it comes to building out your culture and as a collective. So I'll send you
Rock
through
on.
some stuff on that we can chat about later. Yeah, it's
Rock
fascinating.
on. I'd like that.
Yeah, Eric, how do we find out more about Here Be Dragons, and how do we find out more about you?
Well, for me, it's always LinkedIn. Just find Eric Dunn and Here Be Dragons on LinkedIn. You can check me out. Our website, www.hbdagency.com. Yes, happy birthday, agency. Or Here Be Dragons Agency is where you can find us.
Thank you.
Check out the work. Let us know what you think. Drop us a line.
Yeah, I love it. And thank you so much, Eric. I've loved this conversation. It's been a good one. And just, I don't know, just what's the word I'm looking for? Really just nice way to start my Friday. So thank you so much for your time. And for
Rock
all the
on.
listeners, I hope that everyone, well, I'm sure everyone got a lot out of this one because, it is in times of nothingness that we do get the most clarity to then take us forward and then to be able to really explore the undiscovered spaces. And in those undiscovered spaces, anything's possible.
Well, B, thanks very much for having me. I really enjoyed this chat.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
we'll chat a little bit more about some flow science here
Yeah,
in the next few days.
definitely. Take care. Thanks, Eric. See you.
Yeah, have a killer Friday.